I'm here with Neil Kirton, who is the Hawke's Bay Regional Councillor. Kia ora, Neil, and thanks for joining me.
Yes, no, pleasure to be here, Andrew.
Yeah, good to see you. Neil, we were just discussing it's quite a busy old time at the moment, and the council has just recently held its 3-year plan hearings. It's also proposing a 19.6 percent proposed rates increase. How do you think proceedings have gone so far this year?
Well, it's been a very long and convoluted journey for councillors, particularly new councillors coming on board. Obviously, the events of 2023 with Cyclone Gabriel and its aftermath have really, if you like, tipped the organisation up on end from a business as usual perspective. So the engagement in the last year has obviously been on cyclone recovery and trying to stand up our flood protection and to restore the land and our waterways, etc., across the board, and obviously deal with the tragedy of so many people out of their homes. It's been a very, very testing time for the entire region, probably the most challenging in my experience of 20 odd years around in public office.
The council seems to be coming under fire over two issues. The one seems to be the decision by the council. It wasn't a unanimous decision, but to move from a land-based land value rating system to a capital value rating system. And this has sort of coincided with, as I said, a proposed 19.6% rates rise. Those two issues together seem to be putting strain on people and resulting in pretty high, sometimes 100% rates increases. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's been a most unfortunate coincidence of the review of the finance policy and considering such thing as a major shift in the way in which the rates are struck in terms of capital value and land value. And then on top of that, probably the most significant driver of rate increases for some has been the move the revaluation on properties, and then added on top of that is the increment, the 19.5% increment on rate, the cost of rates itself, and that's the compound effect of that has been absolutely astronomical for many properties, including my own. I have to say, close to 200% rise in my regional council rate. So that's been really, if you like, challenging, and something that I think, in hindsight, it would have tempered and coloured our decision making around, if you like, changing the rating base. So I think one of the lessons we've learned is that we needed to put the whole picture together, and it's only at this late stage that that's dawned on councillors that we've got this major challenge with massive increases for some ratepayers.
Because you were a councillor who voted for the change. Are you saying that if you had it differently, you would vote against it?
I've always supported a move, Andrew, to capital value. I've done that for 20 years. I think it's a much fairer way of applying rates. But having said that, the problem in taking that decision in isolation and the global impact of it on ratepayers is something that should have been factored in. And in hindsight, I would have said, let's defer that sort of decision making until we've resolved our long-term plan, particularly in the chaos of Cyclone Gabriel, the recovery from that. So in that respect, I do regret that decision, not in principle, but certainly in its application, and that's where I think the council ought to take its next step to remediate that.
Because for those hearings into the change to capital value, we had 500 people give submissions, and of that, 90% were against. However, it was a minority of the ratepayer base. You said during one of the meetings that this indicated that the silent majority were in favour of that. Do you seriously believe that?
Well, look, I'm not in favour of a consultation process that is essentially a beauty parade and based on the number of submissions made. And clearly there was a major thrust, if you like, from interested parties to get a lot of submissions in play. And we've seen that lately with the tourism submissions coming forward. To me, the decision should not be based on simply on the number. Certainly, it's a reflection of the view of a lot of people, but the other side of that equation is those people, and there were at least 50% of them of the ratepayers were receiving a reduction in their rates. So who's going to speak for them? You know, I'm sure they wouldn't if they turned their mind to consultation and putting a submission in. I'm sure they wouldn't have agreed they would have agreed with the position to move from LV to capital value. So that's another factor that needs to come into play. The decision itself was cost neutral. That is, no increase, global increase in the quantum of rates taken. What it did was distribute it, and I believe more fairly, away from lower socioeconomic groups, lower costed properties onto those that could more reasonably afford that shift. And you've got to remember also that it's only 30% of the rate take is based on capital on the general rate is constructed previously on land value, and a good percentage of the balance of the 70% is actually constructed on capital value. So we're already most of the way down the road on a capital value system. We're simply doing the last bit of it. So I just don't accept the logic that was put up by submitters, and that's why I'm not convinced by a majority of submitters. I just think they're wrong.
But you said that it doesn't affect the lower socioeconomic people, but yet some properties in Flaxmere, which is considered
Yes.
a low socioeconomic area, have been hit the hardest.
Well, no, they haven't been hit the hardest. That's another misnomer. They have been hit in a very anomalous way, and we are determined to find out why that's happened. Clearly, we don't run a program across every rateable unit to determine that. But what I can say is the vast majority of lower valued properties received a reduction in their general rate, but sitting amongst them are some anomalies. Now, what it pointed at and this was a very valuable thing coming out of, if you like, the submission process, is that the valuation methodology is not pure. It contains anomalies, and but on balance, I think it's the best we can do at the moment. But it does what it did reflect was anomalies occurring, and we need to get to the bottom of that. It, in my view, didn't negate the decision. It probably should colour, if you like, more due diligence about, if you like, exploring what those anomalies might be.
Because when you took the vote from LV to capital value, the people that voted against it on the council were growers and farmers.
Sure.
And now, 10 years ago or so, the growers of Twyford got upset with the council over the issue of water restrictions. And their next election, all those councillors who had voted in favour of the restrictions were no longer councillors. Does that concern you, that this could be an issue that gets you kicked out of office?
Oh, look, that's politics, Andrew. Quite happy to. I make my decisions based on what's in front of me. That's what I'm here for. I've been elected 7 times now by people that trust my judgment, and they want me to exercise that. And I believe each time, and mostly I've increased my vote on that basis. Well, look, if someone's got a better way, if there's a better person comes in front of the public, so be it. I'm out of there. But I stand by my decisions, and I still believe. To me, the land value, capital value is a bit of a red herring. The real issue is those revaluations, number one, and the major issue is the 19.5 increase. And that's my real bugbear, that we shouldn't, in fact, be raising our rates by that far. We should be taking measures to avoid that. And that's where the real rub is. If people want to latch on to land value, capital value, well, good luck to them. The real issue, the real tree worth barking up is the rate increase.
Now that rate increase, you say something should have been done. You've been on there for seven terms. Why didn't you do something beforehand?
Well, look, I'm one voice around the table, Andrew, and that's democracy for you. Look, if I had my way, if I were the dictator here, it would be different, but I'm not. I've got 10 colleagues who, some of them, not all 10, but probably 6 have got. They only need 6. All you got to do in politics, Andrew, is count up to the majority. In this case, is 6. And clearly, I may have lost some of those decisions, those battles on those issues. At the end of the day, we've gone for submissions. Again, listening to those submitters, and the loud voice coming through is they don't like that increase. It's too much, and the cumulative effects are too great, and that's a voice I really am listening to.
Now, local grower John Bostock has suggested that council should consider selling some assets, not to bring rates down, but on capital projects, which would, in essence, allow the proposed rates increase. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you opposed to selling of assets?
Well, John and I go a long way back, and he's been far more successful in life than in terms of business than I have. So who am I to say he's wrong? But he's wrong. The reality is that our asset base, it's a bit of an optical illusion, because most of the assets cannot simply be sold, as he would suggest. Our ability to maneuver around and liquidate those assets is extremely limited. Number one, so that's a consideration. Number two, you've got to ask yourself, unless those assets are used for significant capital developments, we need to weigh up the return on those investments. And again, the popular opinion is that they're low returning, but I regard 14.1% over the long run to be a great return. And that's the sort of money we can expect, the ratepayer can expect going forward. And we can borrow a lot less. We've got good capacity through the local government fund to borrow around the 4.5% mark. So for every dollar we take away from investment, we lose 2%. So the maths simply don't stack up. And this is something I've lambasted John about in terms of doing the maths. And so from my perspective, I'm saying the case would have to be very strong to remove or to take cash up some investments, the long-term investment portfolio we've got, and apply it to, and I think there is a potential case for some of those, as long as it goes into an asset that there's not business as usual, that it's a genuine development that the ratepayer would get and the people of the region would get good benefit out of, instead of having the cash earning the sorts of money that it is.
Now, you've got some tough choices ahead of you. One of them, there's a proposal to cut funding to Hawke's Bay tourism, which has received quite a bit of publicity, and I think there was obviously an orchestrated campaign at the last hearing you had, where Hawke's Bay Tourism brought every man and his dog to give their view. Are you, which of those options are you in favour of? The one where the funding's cut, or the sort of spreading it around amongst different councils?
Well, from my perspective, I've always supported the preferred option of council. Um, the preferred option is to reduce funding in the coming year down to about 520 odd thousand, and then to reduce further over the subsequent out years.
Mhm.
And so we've had a very strong reaction from the sector. Um, I would have to say, listening to the submitters, I don't want to diminish any particular submitter, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of smoke and a lot of mirrors and a lot of noise. But there's a certain reality that there needs to be change in the tourism sector in terms of its promotion. And I'm interested in getting the best value for money out of the ratepayer dollar spend. We've been doing this for something like 15 years now. We've spent nearly 30 million on tourism. And there is an argument put by various submitted, which we as councillors are weighing up to say, should we benefit one particular part of the economy over another? And we've given that boost to tourism over the time. It's time for the sector, in my view, to step up and make a much greater contribution than has been in the past. And a strong link to our councils as well, who have a greater stake in play around the table than the regional council. And my view is that we, council, ought to really consider closely, is this core business or is it something outside our mandate? And that needs to be taken into account when we make a decision around that.
Yeah, because you mentioned other stakeholders. Are you suggesting people like the airport and that should contribute to tourism?
Oh, exactly. You know, that here we've got made an in submission and making loud noises in the media that tourism is essential to the business of the airport, and the airport will close if tourism Hawke's Bay doesn't function. You know, more smoke, more mirrors, and the reality is they put in something like $360. So you know, something's not right. Same with the Napier Port, making the same sorts of noises, how critical Hawke's Bay tourism is to the economy, and yet they put in a measly few dollars. There are clearly stakeholders out there that ought to be funding very substantially more. I mean, they're in a position to fund, you know, $50, $60, $100,000. They need to step up and put their money where their mouth is. And that's my challenge to them, is that if you really value Hawke's Bay tourism, well, front up, put the money up.
But some might say that the regional council's whole rating structure was based on a portion of that going towards tourism.
No, that's another red herring put up by the protagonists. That's not the case. It's not possible for a council and councillors to rate our ratepayers and take no accountability and demand no accountability for its use. It's an economic development rate. We could equally go to you know, some other sector of the economy and apply those funds to it. It's not specific to tourism. It's an economic development rate. So I just reject that there was some sort of pass-through, that we are collecting this rate on behalf of the tourism sector and handing it over. That's not the case.
Now, other proposals are aimed at regional parks, and there's been once again quite a bit of publicity around Tamata Park and the fact that they could lose funding as well. What's your view on that? Do you think that is something that needs to happen?
Well, look, at the end of the day, we've got ratepayers facing, you know, 20-odd% increase in their rates. Something's got to go. What we've done by way of an option, our preferred option of councillors, is to make cuts in those areas. In terms of priority, is that our highest priority? And we're saying no. We've got other higher priorities at the moment. You know, we're there to listen to those submissions. I'm not definitive about that, and I'll reflect on it over the time. But we've certainly trimmed back the developments in the estuary, the regional park there, and other parks. So it's not tomato doesn't stand alone. And we heard the passionate pleas of the people living close by. Well, look, something's got to go, and this is possibly a lower priority than protecting and building our stock banks and protecting us from floods. That's the stark choice we have.
Now, the council's salary costs have, or staff has doubled in the last 5 years, and the cost has increased by 10 million. Do you think you've got a bloated council in terms of staff and workers and that? And do you think there is the chief executive can trim some costs there?
Well, look, I wouldn't put it in the terms of a bloated delivery of services. What I'm interested in is to ensure we've got the most efficient and effective way of delivering, or we need to actually trim services to reflect the affordability of rates. And the stark reality we're facing is that we cannot afford the increases that we've had. We've got to trim services and cut our cloth accordingly. It's no different than any other business, and that's one of the concerns I have is, if you like, the ability of a public sector, such as in our local government, to make, if you like, bold, sharp, fast, and hard decisions around its delivery to trim those costs. And that's the challenge facing council at the moment, is getting in and making those adjustments to its budget. And to me, that's inevitable. We've got to do that. We're overextended. We need to cut back and make sure we can deliver at a cost to the ratepayer that they can afford.
Out of all the proposals to get rid of services, what are the ones that you don't agree with?
It's not so much not agreeing with, it's about limiting and recognising that we're needing to, if you like, reduce the level of service. So there are a number of areas in council that we have expanded in recent years, and it's a matter of saying, look, gosh, we may have overreached. We may be delivering too much beyond our means, and trimming those services. So we'll be having a good look at every nook and cranny of the organisation in the coming year to make those cuts and to determine what the highest priorities are.
Do you think, as it's been suggested in various quarters, that the council is out of step with the community?
I'm beginning to think that way, Andrew. I think that, and particularly the cumulative effect of, as I said earlier, the revaluations on property, the land value to capital value impact, and then on top of that, a 20% rate rise this year and another 20% next year. That to me indicates we are out of step. We need to and should have recognised this 6 months ago and have responded faster. But having said that, I think it does need to be put in the context of the cyclone year that we faced, the most challenging in a generation. And essentially that took our focus, and appropriately so. Restoring, protecting our properties and people, and putting people's lives back together was a priority. And I don't think we should resolve from that at all. But we've got a bit of catch up to do in terms of managing the business better.
So how do you change going forward so you can get back in step with the community?
Oh, I think it's just a very thorough review of our services, identifying the priorities, and making the cuts where it's where we can live with those cuts. But cut we must. There's no way around it. Services need to be reduced.
Now, there's still a way to go, but you must be thinking of the future. Do you have another term in you?
Oh, look, I'm only a pup at this game, Andrew. I'm, only halfway through my 40 years of service to the region. So, look, I've got a long way to go.
And have you enjoyed being a councillor?
Oh, it's been a wonderful experience. I think I said earlier, the people out there who support me, they put you in there because I think they trust your judgment, and I think not. I think mostly I've got it right. Being able to put my hand up and say when things are wrong. I've often been around the table, and I used to be the eight. I used to be 8-1, and there was one lone voice out there. And I'm looking back at those decisions. For example, around civil defence, my 8-1 voice, unfortunately, was the right one, and a number of other decisions that were made where I was proven right. And I don't want to be saying I told you so, but sometimes I told you so.
What were you proved right about?
Say again.
What were you proved right about?
Oh, look, I opposed the move of civil defence from the TAs, our councils, aggregated to the centre and managed, administered, and rated from the centre. To me, that was always removing and compromising the integrity of civil defence, which is about localised responses in emergencies. And no greater example than our flooding situation, where the whole structure clearly failed to respond to the needs of isolated people needing help on the day, and we just failed them. And the reality of that outcome is the fact that we had no localized delivery. So that's the most stark one I can think of, Andrew, but there are several others.
And how do you feel the Cyclone Rebuild program is going as far as regional council is concerned?
Oh, look, I couldn't be more. I give high praise to the team working behind the scenes. I know what that looks like. So from if you like, a funding perspective, to start there, we've had a tremendous result and response from central government, and that's down to some really smart heads around the regional council table in the back room, pushing and shoving and making sure we got that $213 million in the door. That was a tremendous outcome for the region. In terms of delivery, the asset group, Chris Dolly and his team have stood up, absolutely decimated stock banks and restored those to a reasonable level of confidence. So we just cannot. I cannot speak more highly of the efforts that went in by staff around the council over the past year. I think it's just been extraordinary, and so I just can't speak more highly of the people involved.
Now, what message do you have to those people out there who are angry with the council or upset with the council?
Look, I get it. When I looked at my the rate rise that I'm finding, I really drew breath and thought, "Gosh, we've got this wrong." And there are thousands of people in a similar position facing great hardship as a result of this accumulative effect. And so I'm in great sympathy with them and do everything I can to try and limit and reduce that burden on them. They have a right to be angry. They've got a right to be angry about the response that we gave around the immediate aftermath of the emergency in February last year. We could have done better, should have done better, and that's part of the heartache behind the feelings that are out there at the moment.
Neil Kirton, thank you so much for your time and all the best in what I'm sure is going to be an interesting time ahead for you.
Great. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.